All right, let's dive right in. We're looking at a case today that is just fascinating. It's about a deeply personal family fight that went all the way to the Supreme Court of the Philippines. And it really forced everyone to take a hard look at a tough question. Where does a parent's authority end and an adult child's freedom begin? Yeah, how far can parents actually go to bring their adult child home? When does genuine concern become, something else, infringing on their liberty? This is the question at the absolute heart of the Lucena family's story, and believe me, it all kicks off with a truly desperate plea.
So, let's talk about the parents, Relissa and Francis Lucena. They felt like they had their backs against the wall, So they took a really drastic step. They went straight to the Supreme Court, asking for two of the most powerful legal tools in the entire system. What they did was file for something called a Writ of Amparo and a Writ of Habeas Corpus. Don't worry, we'll break those down in a bit. They filed this for their 19-year-old daughter, Alicia Jasper. Everyone calls her AJ. In their minds, she was being held against her will and her rights were being violated by a youth organization called Anakbayan.
Okay, but before we can really get into the court's final ruling, you have to understand the story behind it all, the human side of it. This whole thing didn't just happen overnight. No way. It was a slow burn, a series of events that really pushed this family to the absolute brink.
So, let's walk through how this all went down. It starts back in 2018. AJ is in grade 11, still a minor, and she gets involved with Anakbayan. Fast forward to February 2019, and she tells her parents, "I've officially joined." The very next day, she leaves home. She comes back 3 days later, but that's just the start. In March, she leaves again, this time for a lot longer, over 2 months. And then, on July 10th, 2019, she leaves for a third time, and this time, she doesn't return.
And this is where you see two completely different stories emerge. Two totally opposite realities. On one side, you have the parents. They're telling the court, look, she was recruited when she was still a kid, she's been brainwashed, her consent doesn't count because she's been manipulated. But then you have AJ's side of the story. She comes out publicly and says, I was never abducted, I left on my own. And she said she did it to get away from what she described as an abusive and repressive home.
Okay, so remember those two legal tools the parents used, Habeas Corpus and Amparo? To really get why the Supreme Court made the decision it did, we've got to understand what these things are actually for. They're not your everyday legal options, they're really powerful.
First up, the Writ of Habeas Corpus. The name literally means produce the body. And that's exactly what it does. It's this super important fundamental protection against someone being locked up or held illegally. If a judge grants it, they're basically ordering whoever is holding the person to bring them to court and prove that the detention is legal. It's a direct challenge, saying, show me the person and justify why you're holding them.
Then we have the Writ of Amparo. Now this one is even more specific. It's like a high-powered legal tool for only the most severe situations. It's not for just any rights violation. The Supreme Court has been crystal clear on this. Amparo is for cases of extralegal killings and enforced disappearances. And, crucially, it's typically aimed at situations where the state, the government, or forces acting with its approval is involved.
Okay, so now that we know what these two writs are really for, let's look at how the Supreme Court took those definitions and applied them to the facts of AJ's case. And their approach was, as you'd expect, very logical, very step-by-step.
So, the court basically went down a checklist. Let's start with habeas corpus. The main question is, was there illegal confinement? The court looked at the evidence and said no. There's no proof she's being held against her will, and this is the big one. She's an adult. Her parents don't have legal custody anymore, so petition denied. Then they looked at Amparo. Remember how strict that one is? It requires an extralegal killing or an enforced disappearance, usually with state involvement. Well, AJ wasn't missing, people knew where she was, and there was zero proof the state was involved in her decision, so that one was denied too.
And then the court dropped this really powerful line that just cuts right to the heart of the matter. It basically said that while it understood the parents' pain, these special legal powers, well, they were never designed to temper the brashness of youth. What a phrase, right? They were making it clear that these writs aren't for settling family arguments or for reversing the decisions of a young adult, no matter how much their parents disagree with them.
So what's the really crucial takeaway here? It's that the court didn't rule based on emotion. It wasn't about deciding who was right or wrong in this family drama. Nope. It all came down to a very clear, very fundamental principle of law. And that principle? Well, it pretty much boils down to a single number, 18. That's it, the legal age of majority. And in the world of law, that number, it changes
everything.
You see, the moment AJ turned 18, the legal authority her parents had over her, it just terminated. It ended. That includes their right to custody. As a legal adult, she now had the right to make her own choices. Where she lives, who her friends are, as long as she isn't breaking the law, those decisions are hers to make. And the law is designed to respect that independence.
And all of this leaves us with a really tough question to think about, doesn't it? The Supreme Court drew a very clear legal line. But for families everywhere, the emotional line between caring for your child and respecting their freedom, well, that's way more complicated. It's that constant tug of war between protection and autonomy, a challenge that, every family has to figure out on its own, long after any judges had their say.